Hi, it's Anne. Thanks for stopping by. So, what do we think of this little notebook? Yes, it's a notebook. We'll just take off that closure and look, it's round pages. And you can see here's little pockets on the inside. And you can see it's a doily. It's so easy, but I don't know that I've ever seen one like this before. There's no new ideas in the world. So if you have been making these for 40 years, feel free to let me know. But I will, will also tell you, I haven't ever seen a doily as a little notebook or a journal cover before. Let's just change that today, okay? I have quite a few doilies. We always accumulate them when we see them, don't we? But I got quite a few, a bag full at an estate sale recently. And I really have been wanting to use those supplies. And I think with such gratitude about the woman whose home I was in, and really feel good about being able to take some of her craft supplies and use them. So that's what I'm doing today. She had a nice stack of doilies of all different sizes. In this little notebook, I just thought, let's just put a napkin on top of it. And then I thought, let's fold it in half like a taco. And oh, look, it's a little, it could be a little notebook cover. Let's make a couple today using different napkins. I have several different sizes. This one might be just a little too big, although, certainly try whatever you want. But I decided to make another teeny tiny one. This is almost a coaster size. And then this one is just slightly bigger. So let's just go ahead and get those started, and then we'll set them aside and let the glue dry and come back and make journals out of them. I love this just joyful summery sort of napkin. And the first thing, I've cut it apart obviously and used part of it already. And when we're crafting with a napkin, we take it down to the single layer. And people have different ways of doing this, but I always just use a little piece of cellophane tape, scotch tape, and just rip off that layer that clings to it. Some of the nice quality napkins have 3 layers, but many of them just have 2. Just take it down to its single layer. Again, I've told you this before. Many people have uses for these. Not me. That's something I do toss. Let's use this size. And all I'm going to use, you can make it probably a little bit sturdier if you wanted to use Mod Podge. But when it comes to adhering napkins, I'm really a glue stick kind of gal. That just seems to work well for me, because that napkin is so thin and it doesn't, I don't think it needs a really helpful or a really heavy adhesive. But again, your mileage may vary. And it might depend on the temperature and the humidity in your part of the world. Going right over those holes, and yes, it's going to go right through onto this magazine page. So I'm going to flip that over, put it on a fresh surface, and just put our napkin down just like this. It's such a joyous all over design that it doesn't matter where I place it. And if your fingers are a little inky, as mine often are, particularly for putting, really wanting to rub down a something thin and rather delicate like tissue paper or a napkin, I put another thin layer in between that I can rub on top of. And that way I'm not putting friction on the napkin layer itself. There we go. And this I'm going to set aside to dry, because obviously I want to peel off the napkin around the edge. Oh, looks like I Got that just a little bit not covering there. I'm not going to worry about that. I think that's something I can trim. I'm going to set this aside and let that dry, and let's do our slightly smaller one. Let me peel off what I want to use though. This looks like I got a couple of craft room stains on this napkin. This is one I picked up on my recent trip to our creative reuse store here in Portland called Scrap. And I'm going to just cut this off. I thought this looked like an interesting little motif here with the bird nest. Yeah, that'll be nice. And again, I'll be folding it partially. I'll be folding it in half so we won't see the whole thing, but I think that's going to be quite cool. And let's take off that backing. Is there one layer left? I think there might be. Oh yeah, I almost could have taken that off without the Scotch tape, but there we go. Let me prep for wanting to flip. Oh, there's somebody's big old steak there. My apologies for the vegans in the crowd if you have to look at that piece of carnivore's delight. I am not a vegan or a vegetarian, but even I don't really don't eat beef like that anymore. I'm using the Doily glue, which, as you know, has been my glue of choice over the past month or so. There we go. And I'm just peeling this off to put it on a fresh surface, just to relieve some of the glue from being in those little crevices. And I'll try to avoid my mistake from the first one. And what did I do with my, here's that tissue paper. And we're just going to fold this after we've trimmed off the excess wherever that motif happens to lie. I didn't want to do any sort of extraordinary pre-planning. While this is beginning to dry, I thought let's go ahead and cut our paper to go into both of these little notebooks. There we go. We'll set this aside. I found two little things. This is what I usually keep my Fabri-Tac glue in, and that's the smaller of the two. You can see this is sort of a beat up little container, and it's not perfectly round, but it's round enough. And since I have this kind of white napkin, I don't want a real grungy paper to go into this little signature. So I think I'm going to choose this coffee stain graph paper. And I think I'm just going to, what I did for my little prototype is I just, if you have a die cutter and you want to make your pages be really nice and tidy, then your die cutter machine is the way to go. But I am going to just go the old-fashioned way and do my cutting by hand. I would like to get several layers at once, so I'll pull out a paper clip or two and 4 circles out of this. Let's draw around the top layer. Make sure I can see all the way around there. And that's going to give me 4 pages or 4 sheets for my smaller sized journal. And this larger size, let me double check to make certain I have the right. This is a little something that was up in my kitchen, and that's going to be okay for that larger sized. And let's just bring in this sort of coffee dyed paper. There we go. I'm not really keen on cutting circles by hand, and so if I can do a bunch of them at once, I am happy to do that. Oops. Let me get that folded quite far enough. There we go. That ought to be adequate. Yes. Yeah, there's something about just these little notebooks that are just a slightly different shape. Well, Anne, I think I'm going to do that one over, and I'm just going to erase because you can see I didn't plan very well there. I'll get closer to the edge, and this ought to be okay. Yeah, having a notebook that's just sort of an unexpected little shape, I think is something delightful and surprising to find in a junk journal. And it just really gets at the whole ethos of the whole thing, doesn't it? It really does. Using our paper in new and unexpected ways. There we go. Use my cutter bees here. And try to hold them fairly still so I don't have a lot of shifting. I had a new viewer the other day who was looking through some of my old stuff and found the little notebook that I had that's shaped like a triangle. I will link it below if it's something you're interested in seeing. I had kind of forgotten about that little notebook because I hadn't made that one in a long time. And I was so glad to be reminded that it was out there, because I thought, oh, I used that a lot. Like maybe last summer, I remember filling it out, that little triangle notebook, in my own personal gardening journal, and writing lots of notes to myself about what was happening in the garden. And when I saw that she had commented on that, I thought, oh wow, I gotta make some more of those little triangle fold-up notebooks. There we go. Now, these are going to be small little notebooks, so we have made 4 pages here. For my first one, I think I just used 3 pages for the little signature, because that, gave me, 12 pages. However many sheets of paper you have, multiply that by 4, and that's how many individual pages you have. I kind of like saving one to cut it in half to use for pockets. So I think I'm going to do that with this one and with this one. And why don't we go ahead and begin those pockets now, because we can do a little bit of decorating on the pockets and be letting those glue, or letting that glue dry. And then we can come back and put the whole thing together, and we can do that lickety-split. Isn't that a fun expression? I don't know if you use the term lickety-split outside the U.S., but let me know. I love learning about different expressions that different countries have. One reason I love watching lots of British drama and learning about, expressions like Bob's your uncle. I love Bob's your uncle. And what did I see? I was watching an old, very early episode of Call the Midwife the other day. And I think it was the chummy character. It was so sweet in the early seasons. I'm going to try to line this up on the graph paper side. This is kind of thin. I might want... this I just made cut quarter circles because the paper's a little thicker, a little more robust on its own. This one I think I'm going to be able to double it up. Anyway, the chummy character was talking about some birth process that I won't get into the anatomy of all of that, but she said everything was going tickety-boo until, and I thought, oh, tickety-boo. What a fun expression. If you're a UK viewer, do you say tickety-boo? And do you smile at yourself every time you say it? Because I would. Turn that out so my coffee stains are a little more evident. And everything can go tickety-boo. Double that up into a double layer, hopefully not getting too much on my craft mat. Oh, and there we go. Now, while we have these little pockets here, let's decorate those just a little bit with our napkin scraps, and then everything can be glue or just waiting, drying on its own. These are the smaller ones, so I'm going to go back to this one. I didn't have a whole lot of scrap. Well, maybe, no, I don't have a whole lot that I'm going to trim off of that one, so I'm going to go back to my main piece. And actually, it looks like I can cover all of these on this scrap, so that will be nice. There we go. I'm going to put glue all over this one and all over this one because these are going to go in the front and back covers. And it might seem kind of silly to have pockets in just these tiny little little journals, but you can always stick a little something in there. And not a whole lot of text there, but enough that it's worth doing. And we'll set this aside and let it dry. And here's our slightly larger. Nice clean version. And this one, I'm going to do a little preemptive trimming here to get this scrap off. Yeah, that's going to take a little while to dry. There we go. Yeah, these summery napkins, I just feel like they needed to be celebrated. They needed to be used. And doilies are just so kind of gracious, aren't they? I do use doilies. If I'm having people over, you know, I'll put those out for coasters, or if I'm, you know, I use them a lot at Christmas time. If I'm putting out Christmas cookies on a tray or something like that, I will always line the bottom with a doily. But I always have plenty left over, and I always snap them up if I see them at the thrift store, or if I'm privileged enough to be able to go into someone's home after they have passed and pick up some of their unused supplies to carry them on. All right, friends. There's this one. The others are setting about. Our doilies are drying, and we're going to be back in a moment. Well, not quite a moment, but a few minutes. Okay, it's almost an hour later, but I didn't really need to wait that long. I just stopped and had some lunch. I set these out on my back porch in a box, and they got some nice bright sunshine, and they are nice and dry now. So I went ahead and partially cut, partially tore the excess napkin or from around the smaller one, and I'll just go ahead and do this one here. I'm annoyed at myself that I messed that up, but I think once I distress the edges, it's not going to matter that much. Well, I partially tore the edge off the other one because it was kind of easy to do that. Let me see if that'll work once I get it started here. I think this particular napkin is going to want to be cut more, so that's okay. I'm not worried too much about a real precise cut, because when I go around and distress the edges, that's going to wear away and tear away some of those little bits that are sticking there. So again, not worried about a precise cut. We'll still be done lickety-split. I think lickety-split is what started our our little reflection about regionalisms. Where could lickety-split have come from? I don't know. Reminds me of another kooky little expression my mother used to have called a lick and a promise. Like if you were just going to do just a really quick job on something and weren't worried about the details, just going to give it a lick and a promise. And go comb your hair. It's not terrible, but you know, just give it, before we leave, just give it a lick and a promise. There was no licking going on, but it was just like running a brush quickly through my hair. Or, you know, go clean the garage. You don't have to get deep down into the corners. Just give it a lick and a promise. All right, here is this big one. I think I'm going to go ahead and distress. I'm going to use walnut stain, which is a little bit of a darker color than I usually do. And this one, yeah, see, that's that exposed edge, and that's barely even visible. I might put it at the back anyway, but a little bit of that napkin sticking out. Now these are still pretty thin, so if you're worried about the strength of it in being a notebook cover, You know, you might want to maybe put a little layer of Mod Podge on it. I think that might help, or maybe use two layers of doily. But because my thought is that the purpose of this particular little notebook is not, it's not going to be, you know, it's a journal element. I don't see it as being, you know, your everyday journal that's in your backpack or your purse, subject to lots and lots of wear. And I see it as being, again, a journal element that's going to go into a pocket of a journal, and not have tons and tons of stress on it. So for me, just these two thin layers of paper, the doily and the single ply of the napkin, are going to be adequate for this. It's going to stand up to whatever sort of activity you put it through. I am going to, I believe, ink the insides a little bit more. I'm going to go ahead and hold it up and do the edges, but then I'm going to run my dauber over this perforated portion of the doily, because that stands out a lot more. And although we'll be covering part of this with our pockets, or we can, I still want the top part of the doily to really be highlighted with our distressing there. This is fun. I hadn't really planned to do two, but what fun that we can, they're so easy that we can just almost mass make. Not a big mass, but all right, there is our distressing. Now all we have to do is create our signatures and stitch those in. I put just a little, some real thin little crochet thread. I'm not even going to use my thicker wax thread that I typically use for stitching signatures in. So let's go ahead and fold this. There was my exposed part. There we go. So that's on the back, barely visible. Oh, doesn't that look pretty? I love that. Now here's 3 circles, and I have gone ahead and done the distressing around the edge there. I should not be impatient. You know, your signature pieces are all, they always line up better when you do them individually. I always want to grab the clump and fold them all together, but whenever I do that, I am sorry. So there's this and this. These 3 little circles that are going to give us 12 pages here. And that's going to fit nicely in there. I think as thin as this is, well, I probably should still poke. And let me see if I've got this paper clip again. Yeah, these things dried very quickly on the back porch. We're having a little bit of a warmer day today. I think it's going to get up to 85 or something like that, which is still not too bad for July. We've had really a much more temperate summer so far than we've had in recent years. So that's nice here in the Pacific Northwest. What I did, I'm doing just the simple 3-hole pamphlet stitch. You've seen me do it. If you've been with me for a while, you've seen me do it many, many times. If you've not, don't worry, it doesn't take long. I go in through the middle, come up at one end, jump down to the 3rd hole that's at the bottom, and then come up the middle on the opposite side of my central twine there. There we go. Yeah, this just seemed, with as small and as sort of delicate as a doily is, I thought this a little bit thinner crochet thread would be appropriate for stitching this tiny little signature in. And again, because this isn't something, you're going to be, just writing about little thoughts here. This isn't going to be your journal that you're going to be solving all the world's problems in. And by the way, if you figured out a way to solve the world's problems, thank you. There is that one, and yeah, these can get turned almost every which way. And I believe I'm going to use my art glitter glue and just come around that curved edge and up the middle. I suppose you could have used a whole, just a half a circle, and glued that onto the back of the doily before you stitched your signature in, but I wanted a little less bulk there. Again, because this cover is not the sturdiest, I want to have it have a little less stress on that spine. And these are not pockets that you're going to be putting big receipts or anything in, but they could be, you could put a little slip of something in there, a little ticket, or, this doesn't, something like that could go in there. Not this particular one, those colors don't suit, but just something tiny like that, little tiny journal card could fit nicely in there. All right, friends, there's this one. We're going to put the closures on in just a minute. Let's go ahead and, I've got my distress ink out. I'm going to distress these pockets. There we go. Now here's our 3 pieces of graph paper, and I'm going to try to fold on the lines there. As long as I've chosen to have a grid kind of paper, I might as well respect the grid and try to follow the visual cues it gives us in its printing. Those 3, and by all means, put in more, put in less, do whatever strikes your fancy. Again, not very thin if you wanted, or I mean quite thin, not very robust, but good enough, I think, for these purposes. If you want the whole thing to be heavier, just a little thin coating of Mod Podge will probably do that for you. Now let's get this folded up. We've got most of that nest there. And get our little signature, that spine nestled up into that spine. There's lots of nestling here, isn't there? And I'm going to just poke 3 holes all the way through all the layers. And get a fresh piece of crochet thread here. Oh, did I get it tangled up? Perhaps I did. Oh, that's not very pleasant. I think that ought to be adequate. Sometimes things can just get tangled just sitting there all by themselves, can't they? Certainly had nothing to do with the way I mishandled them. Anyway, so we're having a little bit of a warmer afternoon today. Well, the garden is all nicely watered. And we'll pick our little grandson up. Actually, in just about a half an hour, I think, we'll go and get him from day camp. Bring him back here to the house for a couple hours, and then he has swimming lessons. So that's one of our fun grandparental things to do this summer, is get him to swimming lessons. During the school year, we go to chess club every Monday, as we volunteer at chess club. But during the summer, he's got a pretty intense swimming lesson regime. He's just enjoying it so much. And we just love going to swimming lessons. We've been taking him for several years at the local community center, and it's just been so much fun to see him go from being a little, kindergarten kid who was, not really happy about putting his face in the water to he's just taken off like a little fish. He's just doing so well. Now, here is one other way that you can finish these insides if you wish to. You can take this first page of your signature and you can glue that down here and glue this down here. And, that gives you only, 4 or 6 or, 8 pages in your actual journal. You have writing space there. So if you want to do it that way, that's another option. But I kind of like having the little pockets there. I just think they just make sort of a nice little statement. They invite whoever's using this to keep something. We're saying, we know you have little extras that you would like to store in here, and we are thoughtfully providing a place for you to do so. It's like having pockets on a dress, right? Oh, that's always a treasure when you can find a dress that has pockets, a dress or a skirt. We ladies were shortchanged in the pocket department for many years, I think. I think our designers are finally starting to provide us the pockets that we have richly deserved all these years. All right. Here is our little half circle notebook, our little one, and our ever so slightly bigger one. Let's close them. I made, I do think that, a little bit of closure is good, but a paper clip works really, really nicely for this. Now, the one I showed you earlier, I put a little dangle. This is, that little dangle is one of our little yogurt aluminum lids from yogurt that we made the other day. And I just put a little jewel in the middle. This paper clip, I just tied some lace on it, so there's nothing special about that. But that looks pretty, I think. If you wanted to put some sort of label or something, you certainly could, but I love it just like that. I think that's perfectly nice, particularly if it's tucked into a pocket or under a belly band in a journal. I didn't want to have a whole lot there. For this one, I used another little punch from a yogurt lid and put a jewel on that and just glued a little bit. Let's put this one up here. There's that one. So there are our 2 little notebooks made out of doilies and napkins and paper scraps. Aren't those fun? Just something that's a different shape, a little unexpected surprise, and a place where you can write some of your super special thoughts. Thank you so much, guys, and we will see you soon. Bye-bye.